Grafting Fig Trees. 1. Reasons for grafting fig trees. 2. When to graft. 3. Selecting scions. 4. Storing scions. 5. Selecting rootstocks. 6. Grafting techniques. 7. Tying the grafts. 8. Protecting the grafts. 9. Staking the grafts. 10. Failed grafts. 11. Grafting in the summer or fall. 12. Results and final tips. Reasons for grafting fig trees. Traditionally, propagation of fig trees is done by rooting scions in a suitable soil mix. However, grafting fig trees has become more popular and, in some cases, has several advantages over rooting. When you have an established tree that is not very productive or the figs lack quality, you can change the variety by grafting the tree. Instead of removing the old tree and losing several years, changing the variety by grafting is a clever way of saving time and using the already established tree's root system. Grafting several different varieties to a fig tree is also a clever way to be able to taste different figs when you have limited space for fruit trees in your yard. It's also possible to enjoy a longer productive season with a single tree, eating figs from June to October, if you graft the right combination of fig varieties. Also, grafting new varieties to a vigorous rootstock allows for a quicker development than traditional propagation by rooting. In some cases, you can even taste figs in the same year the grafts were made. So, grafting, it's a much faster way of evaluating the quality and level of production of a new fig variety in your area. Personally, when scions of rare varieties are in short supply and I receive only a very small tip to propagate, I always choose grafting over rooting, since I have complete confidence in the grafting methods I use. Additionally, when rooting, the scion has to produce roots using its own reserves. When grafting, the rootstock will provide additional energy, improving the chances of success, which can make all the difference when trying to propagate precious and rare varieties. When to graft? Using the right techniques, you can graft fig trees in almost all seasons, but I prefer to do it in late winter or early spring. The waking rootstocks will start to move sap, and this is essential to a quick healing process and a strong union of the graft area. If necessary, it's also possible to graft fig trees in the summer and fall. Don't miss the tips section on the last part of the video if you want to know more about the best grafting techniques for grafting in other seasons. Selecting scions. The best scions to use are the tips of the branches from last year's growth. Usually, these tips have lots of bulging buds that will wake up and produce new leaves in a couple of weeks, helping with the flow of sap and healing of the graft. However, when receiving or buying fig wood, we rarely have the luck to receive the best type of scions, so we have to work with what we have. Receiving older wood and scions too thin or too wide is not uncommon, and they all can be grafted. The lower part of the branches and older wood also has dormant buds that will eventually wake up and can guarantee graft success. However, the buds on those older scions can take more than 4 weeks to wake up, so it's essential to protect the grafts very well to prevent scion dehydration. Storing scions. Scions should be cut while they are dormant. Using a dormant scion with a rootstock that is starting to wake up improves the chances of graft success. It's best to avoid using a freshly cut scion on a dormant rootstock. If that's the case, store the scion for a few weeks until the rootstock is ready. The scions should be wrapped in plastic film and stored in the vegetable drawer of the fridge until they are used. Stored this way, they can last 2 or 3 months and they will still be usable. However, long storage times will decrease the chances of graft success. Deteriorating scions are easy to recognize as they will appear shriveled and bend easily. When using these scions, the chances of a successful graft are very low. You can use a freshly cut scion without storing it, but if you do, make sure the rootstock is already moving sap, or the scion will eventually dry out waiting for the rootstock to wake up. Selecting rootstocks. Grafting established unproductive fig trees. If your fig variety is not very productive, graft some branches with other varieties that are more adequate to your area. Open vase-shaped trees are the best candidates to be grafted. Prune the tree, leaving only the branches that you are going to graft. It's best to prune when the tree is still dormant, but it's also possible to do it if the tree is already awake. In this case, be sure to leave some branches with leaves intact to maintain the sap flowing. 1-year-old branches of roughly the same diameter as the scions are the best option. Prefer lower branches over taller ones when they are available, so the grafts can grow and still be reachable to collect figs without a ladder. If the rootstock is already awake and actively growing, remove the top of the branches to better choose the best candidates for grafting. Choose well-positioned branches in each scaffold and graft them with the selected varieties. If possible, always leave at least one small branch untouched on each scaffold to make sure the sap keeps flowing. Very strong competing branches of the old variety that are left ungrafted on the same scaffold should be pruned down or the apical growth removed, or they might divert the sap from the grafts, making them fail. Grafting suckers from vigorous fig varieties. Vigorous growing fig varieties are quite popular as rootstocks, since their rapid metabolism can impact the growth rate of slower growing varieties. It's best to graft potted rootstocks. so you can place them in sheltered locations and plant them late in the season after the graft has healed completely. Grafting with the rootstock already planted in the ground is also possible, but the graft will be exposed to the elements and it will have to be well protected. Grafting techniques. My preferred techniques when grafting fig trees in the spring using dormant scions are the whip and tongue and the modified cleft graft. I use the whip and tongue when the branch or rootstock to be grafted is roughly the same diameter of the scion. When the scion is thinner than the rootstock, I use the modified cleft graft. People often ask me why I don't use the cleft graft. This is a graft that has been done with a cleft graft. It's not healing properly in the middle because the double bevel ends in the hollow interior of the fig wood. This is quite common when using cleft grafts in figs. It rarely happens when using the modified cleft graft, so I prefer to use it. The whip and tongue technique is a bit more difficult to master, but produces one of the most solid grafts since it has many cambium contact points. Be sure to use a sharp grafting knife and try to make the straightest cuts possible when doing the graft.
You can use a single bevel grafting knife, like this right-hand Victorinox model, or the double bevel model from Portuguese craftsman Gilberto Ferreira I am using here. Using a sharp knife and the safest type of cutting techniques is very important to increase the percentage of graft success and to prevent injuries. Check my video on how to do safer cuts in the channel.
Most young fig scions are hollow, with a white cotton-like material in the interior.
The hollow interior can cause some problems when doing the tongue or when joining the graft, but with some readjusting it's possible to solve most of the issues. Even if the adjustment is not perfect, that is usually not a problem, considering the high number of cambium contact points this type of graft has.
Older scions have more wood and are less hollow inside. Avoid ending a bevel cut in a white area. Redo the cut until it ends in a green area, so the graft has a better chance of healing properly. Wavy cuts make poor contact between the scion and the rootstock. Applying enough pressure when tying the graft can compensate for irregular cuts, but a straight cut is always better. If necessary, redo the whole cut instead of trying to correct it. Make sure to firmly anchor your fingers to the wood to limit the knife movement when doing the tongue to avoid cutting yourself. Adjust the scion to the rootstock as best as you can, making sure the end of the cut doesn't overlap to an uncut area. The modified cleft graft. Choose a spot in the rootstock branch and cut it horizontally with pruning shears. When doing the modified cleft graft, start by making a bevel cut in the scion.
Then make a small 45 degrees angle back cut.
Make a vertical cut in the rootstock away from the center. Use the scion as a template to choose the right spot to cut. The cut should be near an edge of the rootstock, and the final cut should have roughly the same diameter as the scion. Be sure to anchor your hands to the rootstock's wood and don't allow the knife to travel further than it needs to. If the scion doesn't fit perfectly to the rootstock, adjust it to one side of the cut. Make sure the scion is adjusted snugly at the bottom, but the end of the bevel cut is still slightly above the rootstock. In the modified cleft graft, the cambium layers of scion and rootstock always cross at some point, so it is almost foolproof. It also leaves a clean graft when it heals, without weak points, unlike the cleft graft, when the rootstock is bigger in diameter than the scion.
Tying the grafts.
Use a flexible material to tie your grafts, one that allows for a tight adjustment between scion and rootstock. I prefer to use a rubber tape, stretching it and applying pressure as I go along. Make sure to cover the whole area in a way that doesn't let air or water inside the graft. If possible, I try to avoid covering the last bud with the tape when tying. In some grafts, this last bud is one of the first to grow, so I always try to preserve it, making sure that I don't leave a single point for water or air to get in the graft area. In the modified cleft graft, start wrapping from the top, securing the flap of rootstock wood in position. As the flap will only make cambium contact at the bottom, don't worry if it moves slightly, but don't allow the scion to move when wrapping. If you want to preserve a bud that will be covered by the flap, you can cut it to the desired height. It's a bit of extra work, but it can be worth it if the scion has only a couple of buds. Beware that some self-vulcanizing rubbers degrade quickly under the sun. That isn't necessarily a drawback, as the graft will probably be already healed, and you don't need to worry if the tape is strangling the expanding graft. However, In larger diameter grafts with older wood that are slower to heal, applying an additional layer of electric tape will help to keep the pressure on the graft for an extended period of time. Additionally, you can use parafilm to cover the scion. This wax-based tape helps to avoid scion dehydration until the graft has a chance to heal properly. The buds can break the parafilm when they start to wake up. To make their job easier, I like to stretch the parafilm as I cover the scion. A graft that is well adjusted and tied should have no problem with this procedure. However, if you prefer, you can also apply the parafilm to the scion before doing the graft. Protecting the grafts. In the spring, I also like to protect the graft from direct sun in the first couple of weeks. You can use aluminium foil, for instance, wrapping it around the graft. If extra protection is needed, use a padded envelope. That would be too costly with so many grafts, so I went with the aluminium foil instead. Be sure to start uncovering the grafts when the buds start to wake up, which is usually after 2 weeks. If I don't see signs of bud break after 2 or 3 weeks, I like to open the aluminium foil to let some light in, but I try to keep it over the scion like an umbrella to maintain some level of protection. Some older wood scions can take far more time for the dormant buds to wake up, so be patient and control the bud growth below the graft. I like to pinch the apical growth of some buds growing near the graft and try to avoid removing all the older variety bud growth until the graft has several leaves, to make sure the sap keeps flowing in the grafted branch. In some cases, if the graft stays in direct sun for too long, before the buds break the parafilm, several days of intense heat can boil the moisture trapped inside and the graft might fail. After the graft has several leaves and seems strong enough, it's important to keep removing all growth below it to avoid competition. Staking the grafts. Your grafts might break with strong winds if they grow very vigorously in the first couple of months. To make sure this doesn't happen, I always tie a piece of wood or cane between rootstock and scion to help support the graft. Failed grafts. The percentage of successful grafts was very high, with less than 5% failure. Most of the grafts that failed had scions in bad condition, quite dehydrated from long storage to begin with. A couple were cut from older wood, which also lowers the graft chances of success. If you have them available, use the tips of 1-year-old scions in the best condition possible to increase your chances of graft success. These tips tend to have bulging buds that will start to grow very quickly as soon as the vascular tissues grow new connections as the graft heals. I rarely have problems with grafts drowning from too much flowing sap. However, when you cut the rootstock, if you notice that there's a strong flow of sap, make a few shallow cuts in the branch below the graft to purge the excess of sap. I usually remove some of the buds near the graft to avoid competition as the graft heals. Some of the sap will escape through these fresh cuts, so I have no problems of grafts drowning. Grafting in the summer or fall. When grafting in other seasons, like summer or fall, I prefer to use other techniques best suited to the hotter weather and lots of sap flow. The chip bud graft and the patch graft are two techniques that work well in these situations. In the fall, another technique that works well is the T-budding technique. Beware that with budding techniques, unless the bud is well developed, the graft might take, but the bud may stay dormant until the next season. Check my videos on the channel on grafting fruit trees using these techniques. 12. Results and final tips. How many varieties can I graft in each tree? In this example, I grafted 2 varieties in different branches, preserving the old variety in a few branches. When grafting new varieties to an established tree, it's important to respect the balance between the grafted branches and the ones with the old variety. If you leave too many competing branches of the old variety, the new grafted varieties will not have a chance to grow properly and will never reach their full potential. Grafting a maximum of 4 to 6 varieties per tree will be the best option to ensure adequate production of each variety. Managing too many varieties can be difficult, since different fig varieties don't have the same rate of growth. Fig varieties that grow very vigorously should be pruned more aggressively to maintain the right balance between these and the slower growth varieties. In my orchard, I am currently grafting less interesting trees with several new varieties. Grafting will speed up fig production in the new varieties compared with traditional rooting methods. In some cases, grafted varieties can produce figs in the same year. Check my video From Grafts to Figs in 5 months to see an example. As I have more varieties than rootstocks available, and I don't know the quality and production level of each one in my location, I had to graft more varieties in each tree than I usually recommend. In some trees, I grafted 8, 10, 12 or even more new varieties in each tree. I even did some extreme grafting, like this 18 fig varieties example, which I really don't recommend. However, less interesting varieties can always be removed later, just by cutting the branch where they are grafted. If a new variety has a very high quality, I might do an air layer of the grafted branch so I can plant it on its own. If you want more information on air layering fruit trees, check my videos on the subject in the channel. Show me your appreciation for the time and effort I put in these videos by liking, leaving a comment and sharing the video. If you haven't already, consider subscribing the channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss my future videos. Good luck with your grafting! Thanks for watching.